the great majority of people want to comply. They want to follow. They want to do the right thing. And sometimes it's just hard.
Hey there, welcome to the AI Sidekick, the show designed to help you banish your AI anxiety. I'm your host, Ryan Heath, from Robin AI. This week's guest on the AI Sidekick is Bill Ryan, who is a triple threat. He is the Senior Vice President, Chief Compliance Officer, and Assistant General Counsel at AT&T. Bill, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ryan.
Now, you've been at AT&T for like a big chunk of your career. Can you sort of kick us off by telling us what attracted you to the company and to telecoms in general? And then more importantly, like what's kept you there? It's obviously something great about the company that's keeping you engaged.
Sure. My career journey is, I think, a little unique. I actually started out just about 30 years ago as a elementary school teacher in Oakland, California. And that predated going to law school. And after working in private practice for a bit, I actually started with DirecTV. And so at DirecTV, I was responsible for negotiating our video content agreements with everything from the NFL to Disney to HBO. And then that ultimately resulted in when AT&T acquired DirecTV, I transitioned from DirecTV to AT&T. And telecommunications has been an awesome fit. There's a reason AT&T has been around 150-ish years in terms of it's in a constant state of transformation and evolution, which from a legal and compliance perspective is just awesome. There's so much history and kind of an insatiable desire to continuously evolve and help better serve customers. So it's been a great match. It's fascinating technology, fascinating customer focus, lots of really unique legal and compliance issues. And then just, great people, great teams, great people.
And so many new structures. Like I had quite a bit to do with telecoms when I lived in Europe, and those companies just move so much slower than AT&T. And Randall Stevenson would come over and talk to us about what he was doing. And I'd just be like, oh, please, can we get some more of that in Europe? So I'm glad you got that on the front lines as well.
As quickly as customers change, and some of it would sound cliche, but you constantly have to anticipate where the customer is going. And so it just brings a massive customer-centric focus into how you're delivering your network, your devices, your connectivity. They're ultimately going to vote with their wallet. And it creates a real culture of innovation. And so the pacing of good innovation is fast. And so we get to be part of that.
And it's only getting faster with AI. So maybe if we talk a little bit about how you relate to AI as a chief compliance officer. So, obviously a big chunk of the job is preventing violations of the law or regulatory practices that you guys are all required to follow from the FCC and others. So where is AI most helpful in that? Is it about sort of spotting new risks and preventing them from ever becoming a problem? Or is it about kind of like just putting faster Band-Aids on the problems when you spot them?
No, it's a great question, Ryan. And listen, in all honesty, we're on the journey, right? As predictable as that may sound, I'm not sure we fully yet know the definitive path of how AI intersects. But I think conceptually, if I think about kind of broad categories, when compliance is done well, in my perspective, it's easy for our customers, our employees to comply and follow along with the expectations from a legal and compliance perspective. We make it simple. We make communication clear. The great majority of people want to comply. They want to follow. They want to do the right thing. And sometimes it's just hard. And I think one of the elements that we're seeing with AI is the simplicity in terms of taking incredible amounts of information and making it more digestible, using it for different tonalities in terms of how we're trying to communicate a specific issue, pressure testing. Hey, help me translate this phrase, not necessarily into a different language, but, simplify, shorten, make it clearer. And so I think even if we don't necessarily accept the recommendation from AI, it's creating a good almost back and forth thought process to ensure that it's as simple as possible for people to comply. I think the other key component of a good compliance program typically is it's easy to report. And, if you see something, you can say something. And I think AI, in terms of the ability to ingest information, make it easy to kind of provide detailed structure to your concern, and then, thoughtful response to the concern. So not only is it easy to comply, but if someone's not complying, the ability to more easily, more efficiently, I guess, report I think AI has a ton of opportunity there. And then I guess the third bucket I would identify is the one you captured. The really interesting area is the predictive analysis side of it, right? It's taking swaths and swaths of historical data and looking for that trend and saying, are we allocating our attention, our resources to the right risks based upon what the data tells you is the area that we could be most focused on? And so I think that's where, we're in the earliest stages, but that's probably one of the areas that I'm most excited about of really, again, not necessarily replacing what we do, but supplementing or enhancing the function that our team currently is responsible for.
I'm glad you brought up risk because it kind of gets a bad reputation because, risks can be scary, but also they're just the lifeblood of innovation. So I guess in my mind, where I'd love to see AI get to is where it is just giving you a better overview of what the risks are. So you can kind of make smarter choices about which risks you do want to take on, not violating the law, of course, but people have to have some risk tolerance. And if the AI can help your teams help them manage that, then that seems like a good thing.
I completely agree. I think, again, where it helps us look at situations is it's nearly impossible to identify or mitigate every single risk, right? I mean, there are endless amounts of risk if you look at any situation. What's really interesting is the objective prioritization of risk and saying, take the data set and then pressure testing that against what, our analysis, our historical interpretation, just get an objective analysis in terms of a comparison of here's our approach. What is an AI consideration? One of the things I consistently hear is AI, non-negotiable strengths are summarizing and comparing. And that's an oversimplification, but it's hard to argue with that. And so that's something we're consistently doing is saying, let's benchmark our approach against what an AI interpretation of the data is saying. How do we allocate resources against each of these risks? It is right. Risks are scary. Risks can be intimidating, but I think exactly as you identified, they often bring energy and intensity and creative thought, which does create, additional goodness to the overall business, whether it's in the compliance space or any space. Disruptors create risk, and disruption, whether it's a new type of risk or whether it's a new competitor or a new product, they bring creativity and energy. There are a lot of upsides to risk that we definitely think about.
And if we sort of get specific about what your legal workflows are, do you find that the way you use AI is kind of like a one-stop approach where you just inject them into one part of the workflow to summarize or check things? Or is it something more complicated where you've had to step back and design a new workflow because the AI comes in at 3 or 4 different points in an existing process?
We have pockets where we're deploying it tactically, and it's, there are self-contained systems in terms of reviewing of certain policy submission requests or shortening policies. And those are pretty self-contained, at least for the initial analysis. I think where we're seeing it can be more disruptive is in areas like investigations, in terms of generating reports on the intake. There's different places where you can deploy it. It's really for us at this point, I think in the early stages, a partner in terms of the overall work product. And so we're using it where it can be disruptive and beneficial, which makes it a lot of fun, It's a more malleable tool than I think I thought about. It's not a standalone box where you ingest an output. You kind of find existing systems or processes. And like you suggested, we deploy it at different points. So whether it's contract redlining, whether it's conflict of interest, submission review, whether it's contract summarizing, whether it's restating policies, we're using it, but I don't think we've reached the end state of definitively this is the limit of AI. Because I think every time we deploy it, we find, there's an offshoot to additional efficiency or enhancements.
I think you're exactly right. Like we're finding new use cases all the time where we didn't realize, oh, hey, actually, our tool can be used to help you respond to a cyber incident and make sure you're managing all of your legal obligations around that was one example that never occurred to us. So you got to kind of just like put it in people's hands and let them play around with it and then the use will find you if you do that with enough folks.
Perfectly said. And I think, it's a little embarrassing at some point, but until you dig into it and start using it yourselves, I mean, it's an incredible tool that I use repeatedly. I mean, I've made the statement. I feel like I'm probably saving an hour to an hour and a half of time that was previously dedicated to issue summarization or agenda creation or brainstorming topics. And that, I think, the personal engagement for your own utility is, again, and maybe most people are doing that, but that for me was the precondition to thinking about it more strategically at organization level. was to develop that personal facility of it. One thing I like to talk about with AI, though, is, and this is where I think a lot of our brains go, and my brain would consistently go here, which is the efficiency and the opportunity. What I think was interesting and what we've been talking about as an organization a lot recently is there's a counterbalance to this, which is the risk vectors that are typically driving our concerns from a compliance or legal perspective are also using AI to be more effective from attack vector. The attacks are more sophisticated. The allegations are more comprehensive. So even though we are becoming more efficient with our time and with our potential compliance approach, I would also say the underlying risk, if someone makes an allegation, make pretty comprehensive allegations using AI, and that is been democratized, so almost anyone with access to a basic AI tool. And when we receive one of those allegations, we aren't as efficient as we were historically, because now it comes across as a much more sophisticated, developed process or document. So anyways, I think there's an interesting vector where a lot of us are initially focused on the efficiency and upside, but the reality is the complexity in the risk sector is also benefiting from the use of AI to become a more challenging opponent, as it were.
That's fascinating. I don't even think there's language for that necessarily, but it's a kind of weaponization of AI, but it's not misinformation. It is strategic misuse of litigation, let's say.
Right. I mean, if you were writing a note and you were complaining, your local grocery store overcharged you, you used to call and say, hey, I think I was overcharged on this product. Now you have people where they can say, go to a basic AI tool and say, draft a legal complaint, right? And I'm not encouraging this, but this is a reality, right? People are accessing these tools and using it in a way that's different. And obviously, when we get to the analysis, we determine pretty quickly, okay, this isn't valid and this isn't substantiated. But there's an additional process now because they're appearing in a way that's showing the benefit of AI. So it's something we've started to talk about as a team is, there'll be tooling and there'll be good ways for us to identify what's AI generated and how to quickly assess that. I don't think it's easy enough to say that this is just everything's efficiency, everything's upside. A lot of the challenges we have will become more complex because of the use of AI as well.
And it's also a very good illustration of what I suspect, which is that AI is going to shift the tasks and the elements of a job around, but it's not going to end up eliminating that many jobs, at least not in legal, because the fact of AI being able to produce this other material is going to require humans to handle it. So your human lawyers are still going to be needed to deal with that, regardless of how much else is automated or sped up in a kind of efficiency gain from AI. So, I think it's kind of a complex picture when it comes to all those labor questions.
I think that's right, Ryan. I don't have the answers of it yet. What I've told people, though, if the analogy that AI is like the dawn of the internet is right, the dawn of the internet created a lot of work, right? And created a lot of additional opportunities. And at the time, there were a lot of efficiencies that people identified in use of the internet, right? And I think there's an analog there. It's too early to say it's the perfect analog, but I do, at this part, I wholeheartedly agree that the complexity of, at least in the legal space, of having to manage of all the issues that are created by AI, it's hard to imagine that this is all pure efficiency, right? There are some areas where we can be more efficient. But again, like I said, I think your opponent in a legal challenge has the same benefits of that efficiency. And so how did that play out over time? So I think there's more to come, but I tend to agree with your perspective.
And have you got any sense of what legal skills might become more valuable in the future, as all of these jobs, sort of the requirements get thrown around?
I can't say definitively that I have the answer on this, but I think one of the things that you see here is thoughtful, data-driven prioritization in terms of analyzing information, because effectively now it's almost unlimited in how many questions or sources or perspectives you can get on a specific issue. And there'll be an appeal to just keep on asking and trying to figure out what's next, what's more. I think the good, solid legal grounding to determine what is the most important thing I should be considering and what is the way to look at it. When you have a world where there is a constant inflow of new information, new perspectives, new data, people can quickly and accurately decipher that mass of data and perspectives and say, I feel good about my prioritization decision, which is something that's gained really over time, I think. But obviously basic data management skills. But I think in terms of assessing your skills and the ability to prioritize of what's a genuine legal risk against what's a legal perspective will be a key differentiator going forward.
shifting to, I don't know how you describe these questions, but a little bit more on the, like, what's happening in the future, or what are the blind spots of AI side of things? So you were saying in the beginning that you started off as a teacher, you're raising a multicultural family. That sort of bring other questions to the fore about, like, what are the blind spots of AI, or how is it going to change our society? Do you have kind of like non-work thoughts in your mind as you approach this technology?
I approach it like any third-party source with a healthy dose of skepticism. It's great to get additional perspective. If I asked you for an opinion on how I should approach a challenging situation, I would listen intently. Would I necessarily implement your suggestion? I don't know. I would probably, combine it with multiple sources or multiple perspectives or my own analysis. And so I approach it as a single source approach as opposed to a definitive, dispositive view on this is the answer. And that is how I think we try to carefully navigate it. I have serious concerns about the underlying data sources. We're seeing, multiple, even the last few weeks, multiple cases, firms being sanctioned for hallucinations by AI in terms of citing cases or propositions of law that were just wildly inaccurate. And so I think if those are appearing in that arena, they're also appearing in other arenas. And in those situations, those are carefully reviewed and they're cited and they look exceptionally real. I think there are constant reminders around that this is almost a perspective, but it's not a definitive answer. I am aware of that. As people engage with AI, they maintain optimism and excitement and energy because there's so much opportunity, but also a fair dose of skepticism, just like they would with any third-party source.
Maybe a little bit of a look back now, or advice you might give to younger lawyers or people who are law students. If someone's kicking off their career now, right when this massive change is about to descend on the legal industry, what advice would you give someone who's about to enter college or about to go into their sort of first legal job today?
I mean, it'll be the opposite of AI, but it will be the development of human relationships and the development of the intentionality of engaging with people early and often, and in terms of building a personal network and a professional network, and the ability to gather lots of different perspectives and have a trusted group of people that your professional career will evolve with and you can rely upon. The power of the human connection, is exceptionally hard to compete with it. And so, as I look at the younger generation and my older teenagers, the focus on the development of those relationships is more complex given the intersection of technology. And so I think in this space in particular, to navigate an evolving technology like AI, to navigate an evolving risk landscape, having a trusted group of people that you can sync with and consult with and learn from and build with. I think those people who are really strong in that area are going to differentiate themselves the most going forward.
Yeah, I think that's really smart advice. Like, I look back at all the crazy advice I got when I was younger. Like, I was growing up in Australia in the 80s, and people were like, if you don't learn Japanese, you won't have a job. And then we were like telling everyone they had to code. And I was like, well, none of those things turned out to be true. But the things you're talking about are like tested over centuries and definitely have remained true throughout that whole period. So I think that's very wise advice. Have you got anything you'd like to tell your 21-year-old self now that you've got the benefit of hindsight?
I'd probably restate a little bit of what I just said in terms of the achievement side, the personal relationship side. On the personal side, there are so many opportunities in terms of the professional landscape of finding something that you're personally passionate about that can bring fulfillment. And this is going to get really philosophical, but as my kids get to that age, we have this conversation, and I think really hard about, what does fulfillment look like, and they help define that, and it's not defined by their friends or social media or even society, that they spend a lot of time reflecting on what does personal fulfillment look like. That I would have advocated really fiercely with my 21-year-old self. And I'm really fortunate to be in a field where I get to lead a big team and engage with really great people and be at the forefront of a lot of cool technologies and help serve customers. That journey was not as linear as maybe I would have hoped. And so I really encourage, when I'm mentoring or talking to younger folks, is what will give you the most sustained, genuine, authentic fulfillment as a person, as a professional, and define that and keep a really broad aperture as you define that.
That's so smart. Like, my career's gone all over the place as well, but I kind of I had steadfast values, but I was open to random experiences. So I ended up in countries I never planned to be in, I worked in fields I never planned to work in, but I've kind of like remained relatively consistent below the surface in kind of what I've been trying to achieve. So, I'm on the same page as you there.
That's great.
Bill Ryan, fantastic that AT&T has still got you, and we're so pleased that you came and joined us on the podcast.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks for tuning into the AI Sidekick. I hope you're now feeling more confident about implementing AI into your business. If you found today's conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe and share it with your colleagues. For more insights or to see how Robin AI can help you make contracts simple, check out robinai.com. See you next time.